Hey everyone, welcome back to the Investing Guideline. This week was very interesting because investors got excited about a lot of things. SpaceX was everywhere. AI stocks kept running. Oil dropped. The Fed spoke. Tesla made more Robotaxi headlines. And GTA 6 somehow became a stock market story. But if I had to summarize this week in one sentence, it would be this. I think investors are focusing on the loudest stories instead of the most important stories. You better stay with me until the end. Because by the end of this video, I will tell you which one of these stories I will pay closest attention to next week. Let's start with what I think was actually the biggest story this week. The Federal Reserve. The Fed left interest rates unchanged. There is no surprise there. But if you listen to the commentary, they weren't exactly celebrating victory over inflation. And this is where I think investors get confused. Every time the Fed sounds a little hawkish, people start acting like the world is ending. Meanwhile, the market has spent most of the last 2 years climbing up despite constant fears about rates. So here is my takeaway. I am not focused on what the Fed says. I am mostly focused on what companies earn. Because if earnings stay strong, the market can continue to go higher even if rates stay elevated longer than people expect. So for me, this wasn't a bullish or bearish event. It was mostly a reminder that inflation is still part of the conversation. So now let's talk about something I definitely didn't expect to discuss on an investing channel. And probably you might guess, that's Grand Theft Auto. So Take-Two stock moved higher after Rockstar announced GTA 6 pre-orders are finally starting, and honestly this game is becoming its own economic indicator. Every time GTA 6 news comes out, investors start calculating revenue numbers like they are trying to solve a problem. But here is what interests me. I can see that people are willing to spend money on this, and that's the only real story. If consumers are still excited to spend $70, $80, maybe $100 on a game, that's a sign consumer demand may still be stronger than many people think. So while everyone is looking at Take-Two stock, I'm looking at what this says about the consumer. And right now, the consumer still looks pretty healthy. So I will be watching Take-Two stock closely, because probably stock will go higher ahead of the November, which is GTA 6 release day. So I want to talk about the oil a little bit. This might be the story with the biggest impact on the average investor. Progress on a potential Iran agreement pushed oil prices lower this week, and the market loved it. Why? Because lower oil means less inflation pressure. Lower inflation means less pressure on the Fed, and less pressure on the Fed means investors start dreaming about lower rates. So it's all connected. But here is the mistake I think people make. Geopolitical headlines change fast. One positive headline can send oil lower, and one negative headline can send it right back up. So I am happy to see oil is falling, but I am not making long-term investment decision based on one geopolitical development. Now let's talk about the company that refuses to stop being relevant, and that's of course Nvidia. So this week, Nvidia raised billions through a bond offering. A demand was massive. Investors were practically throwing money at them. And I think this tells us something important. Whether Nvidia is overvalued or undervalued is a different discussion. What matters is that large investors continue betting that AI spending is nowhere near finished. The high demand is still on the table. The AI trade is not being supported by hype alone. This shows that it is being supported by actual money, and that is what I am paying close attention right now. So Tesla is back in the headlines because of robotaxis. And every time Tesla talks about autonomous driving, investors split into two groups. One group thinks Tesla is going to change transportation forever. The other group thinks it's all hype. Personally, I'm somewhere in the middle. I think the opportunity is huge. But I also think investors often price success before success actually happens. So for me, Tesla remains a show me story. I want to see execution from Tesla, not just promises. And actually, I wonder what you think about this one. Tesla might be the most controversial stock in the entire market right now. Do you think Robotaxi's story eventually works? Or do you think investors are getting ahead of themselves? So let me know in the comments, because I honestly think reasonable investors can disagree on this one. And finally, this story I'm watching closely next week, and that's Micron earnings. This might not sound exciting. Nobody is making Hollywood movies about memory chips, but right now Micron is one of the best ways to measure how strong AI demand actually is, because AI doesn't run on headlines. It runs on hardware. If Micron delivers strong numbers and strong guidance, I think the AI trades gets another boost. If not, investors might start asking tougher questions. This is one of those reports that is more important than it looks. Before I finish, let's talk about SpaceX. Everyone is talking about it, and honestly, I get it. It's exciting and it's a great company, but I think investors are spending too much time talking about SpaceX and not enough time talking about the Fed, oil, AI spending, and earnings. SpaceX is the flashy story, but the others are the stories stories that actually move portfolios, and that's a big difference. And by the way, if you are enjoying these weekly breakdowns, hitting the like button genuinely helps a small channel like mine. It tells YouTube that people find this content useful, so that I can reach more investors who are trying to cut through all the noise. I appreciate every single one of you who takes a second to do that for me. So what should we watch next week? So we should watch 3 things next week: Micron earnings, inflation data, and whether this market can continue ignoring all the reasons people keep giving for why it should go down. Because that's been the story of 2026 so far. The market keeps climbing while investors keep worrying. And until that changes, I am staying focused on earnings, not fear. One thing I'm trying to do with this channel is focus less on the headlines and more on what actually matters for investors. So if that is something you are interested in, I suggest you to subscribe to my channel. We are getting pretty close to 500 subscribers, which is honestly crazy to me, and I appreciate every single one of you who has been following me along. Thanks for watching. I will see you next week.